Thank you, Ali. And I would say that, as I said, this is a test for these popular conferences. Can they expand participation to a meaningful level? And I'm neutral on it. I want to see whether they can deliver. I was out there once, and in a public speech at the Green Book Center, I said that Libyans should ask themselves, why hasn't their system produced better health care? I said, your health care is a scandal. And one of the people in the audience got up and said, you're wrong, it's not a scandal. It's far worse than that. And so, I think this remains to be seen. And I've got my doubts. I think that what works in a New England town meeting environment or a parent-teachers association is very, very difficult to replicate on a national stage. But at the same time, let's see what kind of outputs might come from it.
As far as corruption, it's interesting in the sense that some of the reports are that the corruption has been actually growing in Libya, and that, in a sense, that makes sense, and that's what you would expect if, when you look at the level of international business and the level of public spending over the last few years. You have more public spending. You have the volume of contracts going through the Libyan government is such that it's often hard to distinguish between wanton corruption and mismanagement for whatever reason. Mismanagement for a lack of technical capacity, a lack of institutional and bureaucratic capacity, and also more opportunity for corruption. I think the only way that it will change is, one, is a definite Libyan government priority to eliminate the corruption, and two, once that priority is there, to be able to have the institutional capacity to deal with it, to be able to put processes and systems in place. There's an independent audit authority called the Raqaba, which changed its leadership recently last year, and there were reports that there was one very tough woman who was put in place to review every single contract. Well, if you have one of those contracts and you're at the bottom of her inbox, you have problems. You have problems in getting payment. You have problems in potential changes. You have problems in meeting your milestones of those contracts. But theoretically, that shows a public commitment to address the problem. As David also mentioned, sort of the educational exchange programs, as you have more Libyans trained in public administration, you have a cadre of technocrats, which, if you look at other countries in the Gulf region that dealt with a tremendous amount of growth very quickly, you certainly don't want to make comparisons between Libya and the Gulf states, take that comparison too far, because the Libyans often don't appreciate that. But if you look at some of the Gulf states and their ability to put a class of technocrats in place to manage their growth, I think that things like that will eventually address the corruption if there's the political will to do that.
Let me add one thing to that, and this is really a message for the Libyan government, so maybe you can put that in your embassy report on this meeting. To the extent the Libyan government will choose to deal with U.S. companies, the chances for corruption are going to be greatly reduced. We have a Corrupt Practices Act in this country with real teeth. We put business executives in jail when they are involved in giving bribes to foreign governments. And this is why I'm very hopeful that Libyan business people and Libyan government officials who are dealing with American companies on the ground out there now, finally in larger and larger numbers, are going to get some of the culture of a clean business environment that the United States is known for.
I would also just add to that, it has a lot to do with the legal reform that's going on in Libya. If you look at the amount of public spending that occurred in the United States after World War II, that led to very specific legal changes in the United States. The Brooks Act in the United States eliminated architectural and engineering from bidding and being cost-based. It had to be based on merits, because you don't want someone who bid the lowest to build the bridge. You want someone with the best technical and engineering capabilities to build the bridge. The U.S. has the Prompt Payment Act, and there are things like this that have not yet made it into the Libyan body of law that I think that Libya does have the capacity to make these changes.
I'm June Rogel with the New Israel Fund. I want to go back to the influence of the region, potential influence on Libya. David, you talked about some of the potential elements that could lead to an uprising, and Chuck, you added in high unemployment, but also talked about safety valve. So I'm hearing from you about this planned day of rage, and just thinking about how our country and others were caught off guard as to what happened in Tunisia and Egypt, and wondering what the potential is that could actually lead to a real popular revolution. And I do have a personal interest because I'm scheduled to go to Libya in a few weeks. And David, I'd love to take you with me.
Oh, well, I think it's fair to say that the knowledge base that we have in the State Department, the Department of Commerce, and so on, about Libya has some catching up to do, because it's only in fairly recent time that we've had a fully functioning embassy out there. And it's also the case that our embassy, I suspect, like most foreign embassies, is not really free to go around the country and to sit down at popular conference meetings and take notes. I think that's unfortunate. I think a greater degree of transparency would be a good thing. But I suspect will be a long time finding out what actually takes place, and we may get a very distorted viewpoint of it. Anybody who's tried to gain information about Libya from reading the Libyan press knows that it's a pretty tough process. So I would have to say that, yes, we could be taken by surprise in Libya. On the other hand, the government does have a record of responding to lots of official grievances, usually by trying to deal with them by dumping lots of money into programs to deal with very, very specific grievances, hoping that will do away with the more generalized grievances that people have. And that's probably what we're going to see. We've already seen that. For example, on the same day that I think you had the immolation of Mr. Bouazizi in Tunis, you had what the international press, when they heard about it, described as housing riots, or riots of people who were without housing out in some part of Libya. It turned out that that might have been because of a misinterpretation that was placed on a statement by Muammar Gaddafi himself that seemed to invite people to just move in and take over this housing that was being built, and it led to lots of turmoil and some destruction of some of the housing and trashing of some of the construction companies. And the government has responded to this by pouring more money and effort into making these problems workable. Whether this will contain all the problems or not is debatable, but anyway, that seems to be their strategy.
Right.